for the fantasy football season, and here's a few running backs I would bench this week. The first guy is James Robinson of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So far this year hasn't been that good of a year for Robinson, even though last week was the best game to date this year for him. 15 carries, 88 yards, a touchdown, 6 catches for 46 yards. So right here in week 4, it's a pretty decent matchup with the Cincinnati Bengals. But this Cincinnati Bengal defense, they've been pretty solid over the last couple weeks, including holding Najee Harris down in the running game, even though Harris went over 100 yards receiving. I think in this ball game, they're going to get to Trevor Lawrence early and often. The ball game's in Cincinnati. It's a Thursday night game, nationally televised. And like I mentioned, the first 2 weeks of the season, Robinson didn't do much. Week 1 at Houston, 5 carries, 25 yards for 3 catches and 29 yards. In week 2 versus Denver, 11 carries, 47 yards, and 3 catches for 17 yards. So I think in this ball game, Robinson isn't going to have the biggest of ball games, and I think he'll only score anywhere from 10 to 12 fantasy points. And this week, I would shy away from him and bench him. The second running back, Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. So last week, he was on my start list, was Barkley, but right here, he's banged up again with the knee injury, was limited in practice the last couple of days here. And Barkley, the first 3 weeks of the season, hasn't done much. Only last week with that touchdown bailing him out, 15 carries, 51 yards, a touchdown, and 6 catches for 43 yards in that ball game. But the first 2 weeks versus tougher defenses at Washington in week 2, 13 carries, 57 yards, 2 catches for 12 yards. In week 1 versus Denver, 10 carries, 26 yards, and 1 catch for a yard. So week 4 here at the Saints, it's a tough matchup for this Giant team. I don't like a lot of the Giant players in this ball game. And right here, the New Orleans Saints, they've given up the 5th least amount of fantasy points to running backs. So right here this week, I would shy away from Barkley and keep him on my bench if you could. The next running back's Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles. So I didn't like Miles Sanders coming into the season here for fantasy owners, and so far it's been a struggle for him besides week 1 at Atlanta, where he had 74 yards and 4 catches for 39 yards and a 2-point conversion. But the last 2 weeks here, the way the game script's gone, he just hasn't contributed. Gainwell's been more of a contributor almost in fantasy football. The way the games have gone for the Eagles, being down early in the game and just passing a ton. Week 2 versus San Francisco, 13 carries, 55 yards, and a catch for 4 yards. In week 3 at the Dallas Cowboys, only 2 carries for 27 yards and 3 catches for 28 yards. So here in week 4, another tough matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs, who you know are going to come out in this ball game on offense like gangbusters, and then trying to make Jalen Hurts and this Eagle offense one-dimensional. So right here, I don't think Miles Sanders is going to get a good workload once again if the game script's going to go like it did the last 2 weeks, which I really expect with this Chief offense. And right now, he's a guy I really can't count on, and a guy I'm benching at running back this week. The next running back's Melvin Gordon of the Denver Broncos. So Melvin Gordon, he's been pretty good so far this season for fantasy owners. Week 1 at the Giants, 11 carries, 101 yards, and a touchdown for 3 catches and 17 yards. Week 2 at Jacksonville, not a good game though. 13 carries, 31 yards, and 2 catches for 38 yards. And week 3 versus the New York Jets, his biggest workload of the season. 18 carries, 61 yards, a touchdown, and a catch for 21 yards. But right here in week 4, things are going to change now for this Denver Bronco team. They're going to verse the Baltimore Ravens, and the easy matchups are out of the way now. Now it's game time, and the Broncos, they did take care of business the first 3 weeks of the season, going 3-0. But now Melvin Gordon, I just haven't liked his workload and the split he's been in with Javonte Williams. And let's be real, week 1, that 70-yard touchdown bailed him out, or he would have had a bad fantasy day. And week 3 versus the Jets, that goal line touchdown bailed him out as well, or he would only had 9 fantasy points in PPR league. So right here in week 4, this Baltimore team, they just pulled one out the other day versus Detroit on that field goal. But I think this defense, they're back home now. They got to win in a trap game they almost lost, and they're going to try to make Teddy Bridgewater beat them, in my opinion. So this week, I don't think Melvin Gordon does much for fantasy owners, and he's a running back I would bench. And the 5th and final running back I would bench this week's Damian Harris of the New England Patriots. I know James White went down with an injury on the hip, and he's going to be out a few weeks, but Damian Harris, he hasn't done much either this season in my opinion. Week 1 versus Miami, 23 carries, 100 yards, 2 catches, 17 yards, and a fumble loss. Week 2 with the Jets, 62 yards and a touchdown and a catch for 2 yards. And then last week versus New Orleans, they got down early and often, and he's a one-dimensional running back is Harris. Only 6 carries, 14 rushing yards, and 2 catches for -3 yards. So right here in week 4, in this ball game, the Patriots, they're going to be one-dimensional once again versus Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to be trailing early in this one. They're not going to get much going, and they're going to bring in other running backs like Stevenson and Brandon Bolden, in my opinion, and passing down. So right here, the Patriots, most likely game script, they're going to be down 10 points to 14 points early. And right here, Damian Harris in those situations has no fantasy value. So right here, I'm going off game script. I'm predicting. And right here, I don't think Harris has a good game. So that's a few running backs I would bench in week 4 of the fantasy football season.